In the second phase, we have Lenin's theory of imperialism. We have the context of Russia's exit from the war, the creation of the Soviet Union in 1921. The theory of imperialism initially shows that the contradiction generated in the context of the First War, we have a new conflict between the great imperialist powers, which are the oppressors of this system, and the colonial spaces where this imperialist force projects itself, destroying the nature of the social and political ties previously established in those places. Imperialist forces bring capitalism in order to destroy what existed before and revolutionize the way people organize and produce. It is in this dynamic that a new conflict and the new dialectic of capitalism are installed. By understanding this dynamic, we can rethink a power strategy capable of understanding the contradictions of this new moment of capitalism and developing a strategy to overcome capitalism through these new contradictions. Therefore, imperialism has a central role. The struggle is no longer between the transnational labor movement and a transnational industrial banking bourgeoisie. It is now understood as a struggle between the imperialist countries and the countries oppressed by them. Here we have a conflict between the oppressors and the oppressed. We also have the notion that Russia is the weak link in the imperialist chain and therefore is the main potential vanguard force within this new power strategy. The idea of a weak link is important since Marxist thought is evolutionary. There is a relationship between the degree of development of capitalism and the potential for overcoming the capitalism itself. For Marx, this is important because the revolution must start where the transformations arising from capitalism are strongest, such as France and England. So what happened from the 20th century onwards? We have the revolutions in Russia and China, for example, which are not the centers of capitalism. At the time of these revolutions, these countries were fundamentally agrarian. The places where revolutions materialized, unlike what Marx imagined, were countries where the bourgeoisie was weak and the agrarian world had not yet dissolved. That is, the process of the development of capitalism was not yet complete. For Lenin, this is not exactly a problem, as it required a country that was strong enough to be imperialist, but also fragile enough to undergo the revolutionary process. So we have the idea of a weak link. Russia would be the weak link between the countries. When Russia starts to participate in this revolutionary process, it serves as the vanguard of this project, but it's weakened by the kind of hegemony in the US after the Second World War. Why is World War II relevant in this regard? Second World War breaks something fundamental to capitalism. Even in the 19th century, British hegemony had a very high price to be maintained, as extreme poverty was produced so that production model could be kept standing. 20th century capitalism post-Second World War is a moment when we have the combination of an unprecedented degree of productivity of American capitalism with a deliberate policy of income distribution and welfare. This weakened the socialist movement, as it removed the kind of contradiction that this movement fed on to transform the understanding of reality into a strategy for political action. This is important to understand, as classical Marxism needs this connection between understanding reality and the strategy of intervening in reality. For Marx, it makes no sense to separate these two things. This separation is linked to a contemporary way of looking at the problem of knowledge. This puts Marxism in a different dilemma that it had previously faced. In this, capitalism manages to increase production and distribute wealth. We also have another impediment. From a certain point in the Cold War, with people fleeing the Soviet Union, the brutality mainly of the Stalinist regime began to become blatant for the Marxist intellectual community in Europe and made it difficult for the academy engaged in Marxism to defend what was happening in the Soviet Union. Therefore, the political practice that could be used to defend an alternative was somewhat compromised, to the point that it was difficult to defend what was happening under Stalin's authority in the context of the Soviet Union. In a way, Marxism becomes a positivist theory. Like Waltz thought, it becomes a structural theory, a theory that seeks to understand the working structures of reality, but that will not develop an understanding of political action strategy to effectively intervene in this society. In the